Week 10 is behind us. We're officially into the double-digit weeks of the NFL season. And many thought Week 10 would be a lower-scoring fantasy affair with some of the best fantasy offenses like the Chiefs, Dolphins, and Eagles on bye. But people forgot about the true number one overall quarterback in the NFL.
Pat Fryer Helmuth.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight. Jamar. Alpha play chase. Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally Pittsburgh. You're right. I'm sorry. I knew what you were going to say there, and I couldn't let it stand.
I'm guessing that that was your way of telling me the cold open was going a little too long there.
No, that was. I know you're going to talk about Dak Prescott.
I was going to say C.J. Stroud.
Oh, okay. So I prematurely cut you off.
No, C.J. Stroud is him, man. That was probably one of my the games I've enjoyed watching the most. I mean, it's been 2 weeks now where I'm just like watching CJ Stroud. I'm like, this dude is such a cool customer. Like, I feel like you see this with lots of young quarterbacks where like they look good and then something happens that kind of shakes them. And it's just like the wheels immediately fall off. Like Tyson Bagent sticks in my mind as like, I want to say it was 2 weeks ago. He's having a good start to the game. And then just one bad thing happened. It was like the dude forgot, not only did he forget how to play quarterback, like he forgot how to like walk or like use his body as a human. Like
it sent him into a spiral.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which does not happen to CJ Stroud.
No, so, CJ Stroud cool as could be.
So before we get into it, I do notice a new background, away with the old background. And do you want to talk about that at all?
I mean, I guess I can briefly touch on it. So my content will not be over at Spike Week anymore. Don't have anything definitive yet. I mean, I do have my Substack, but if you subscribe over there, I really don't plan on putting out a ton of written content over the next few months. I mean, if you want to catch anything that I decide to share, it'll probably be on there. And I may do something else, but I'll certainly keep the people posted on that front.
All right, fair enough. So let's get into our first chart here. I'm gonna add it to the stage, and this is our QB passing efficiency and rushing production chart. And so on the horizontal axis, we've got adjusted yards per attempt, which is like normal yards per attempt, but rewards touchdowns and punishes interceptions. And then vertical axis is touchdown rate, and size of the bubble corresponds to their rushing yards per game. And I guess what sort of stands out, I guess we say this every week, this chart it's pretty stable, right? I don't see too much movement here. But I do notice that Lamar Jackson, his sort of like run bad in terms of fantasy production definitely stands out as a sort of sore thumb where you can see he's obviously playing really well, but just has not been getting the touchdowns that you'd expect with his yardage production.
Yeah, I think what we need at this point from Lamar to have like truly elite fantasy games is we gotta run into some really stout run defenses that just refuse to give up those goal line touchdowns, because like Justice Hill had a rushing touchdown get called back on a hold. Gus Edwards then punched in the rushing touchdown. And it's not that Lamar's not throwing touchdowns. It's just that the offense is getting enough touchdowns siphoned away from the running game that Lamar's not delivering those big weeks as consistently as you would want him to. I still, he's pretty much perennially a good play in fantasy. It's just, all you need is that touchdown variance to go his way. There is a new challenger approaches on the QB chart. We've got Kyler Murray back from his first game, and the rushing wasn't quite as high as like Lamar's, for example, but the guy's playing his first NFL game in a year, coming off ACL, and he looked pretty good. And I'm really interested in that matchup as a whole this week we see CJ Stroud. We talked about how prolific he's been so far in his young career. And we saw it with Joe Burrow, where Stroud is definitely good enough to where he's going to push the other quarterback to have to throw more and, create these fantasy friendly environments. So I'm pretty interested in Kyler with 1 week to shake the rust off now against CJ Stroud in a dome. I think that's a really interesting matchup this week. And both those guys are, reasonably cheap in the different formats, be it DFS or be it, battle royales on Underdog. So I kind of like that game.
And obviously it's sort of obvious, but worth pointing out, Kyler Murray, 0% touchdown rate in a 1-game sample size. Like it really looks like he's in the bottom lower section of this chart, but you got to cut him some slack on that touchdown rate. I did see that he had a couple of big plays where he was, I think he had one run where he was clocked at a very high max speed. And I was sort of surprised by that, given the ACL return. I thought that the my expectation was that the rushing stuff was going to be severely limited in the first couple of games back, but that doesn't seem to be the case. It definitely feels like rushing production is still very much on the table for Kyler Murray the rest of the way, which has got to be. I think that's a big part of his fantasy value. So that if you. The way I normally drafted him this offseason was sort of late in Superflex drafts. So I'm definitely encouraged by that.
Yeah, the way I was normally drafting Kyler this offseason was that I was not. So it was seeing him look so good when he came back. Now I'm looking at these Mac Jones teams where it's like, man, I probably could have had Kyler at similar prices to Mac Jones in a lot of these drafts. And like, yeah, Mac Jones delivered maybe 2 weeks for me where I plugged his score in and was really happy to have him. But definitely makes you think about like the upside of the quarterback. And I know that Pat talked about this summer of like, backloading, weighting the back end of the season heavier, which is why he was lower on Sam Howell. But it really, makes me think about reevaluating how I looked at a quarterback like Kyler coming off of injury. Probably not someone I should have zero of, but in general,
he was definitely a risk-on player where you're getting a severe discount because of an injury, but that injury introduces risk. And I feel like for every player we see coming back off an injury and they're smashing, then you have another player who the first year back they're not quite as good, they're not quite as productive. So I think it's worth keeping in mind that the injury introduces risk, and that when you're taking on the risk of a currently injured player, you really do want the discount. I think you need to be very careful about paying like the prior price for somebody who's injured, even if they are sort of projected to be back. And I'm not talking about like just normal 1 month injury, 2 month injuries. I'm talking about the big injuries like ACLs and injuries of that seriousness.
Yeah, certainly agree with you there that you want to be price sensitive. Understand. I think really this is going to be an edge in basketball for a long time, but it's understanding and appropriately pricing that risk. And
that's the whole game, right? Yeah. That's the whole.
We had a kind of interesting conversation about this in the Shift Chasing Discord channel earlier this morning, where people were talking about like how much does a player hurt you in given rounds if they bust. And I thought about using the roster agnostic advance rate metric to kind of put more of a measurable value on that so that people understood like, hey, like I was DMing with 2-4 offsuit. We were talking about it. And last year, for example, the downside deviation for roster agnostic advance rate through the first 2 rounds was about 6% to your overall advance rate, which is pretty massive. It's like a 40, you're going to really be hurting your teams. If you had a player that was an underperforming player in those first 2 rounds, you were getting crushed. But whereas if you look at like the later rounds, it doesn't move the needle at all. So really the actual risk of taking Kyler is just the opportunity cost of like those dart throw players that you'd be taking at the skill positions, like, wide receiver and running back later. So that's something that I don't think people are appropriately.
So hold on, you're saying that at what round does a bust like become not irrelevant, but does it become who cares? So what?
Yeah, just being able to put more of like a quantifiable measure.
Okay, that's still sort of in the works. That's the question that's currently will be answered.
It's basically, it's done. The data's out there too if someone wants to do the work for me. But all the roster agnostic advance rate stats from last year, and then you literally can like rip my code and do it again for BBM4 once BBM4 is resolved, or at least the regular season's resolved. But if you run that again, get the roster agnostic advance rate for players, and then just bucket them into like the 2-round bucketing, more or less, that'll be fine. And then
someone can do a pivot table.
Exactly. And then you can figure out, hey, if you have a player that busts in the first 2 rounds, it's about a -6% to your advance rate. It's pretty serious. You get a guy that busts in, the 12th round, it's like less than a -1% to your advance rates. Who cares? Like,
right. And the actual takeaway that is don't go for safety in the late rounds, because what your risk of bust, if you bust there, it doesn't hurt you.
Not at all. So, yeah, it's literally.
Or it does hurt you, but not in a serious way. So
the only way it hurt you is that you picked the wrong guy for like you had an opportunity cost of this was a roster slot that you'd love to have occupied by one of these big hits, which can deliver a majorly outsized boost to advance rate. But what you actually lose is so little because everyone around there is not. It's so rare to get someone that
you didn't get Devon Chan, who was a perfect example of taking a swing for fences. And if he didn't work, it didn't hurt you. But if he comes back and he delivers the same sort of production, well, then you got to have him.
Absolutely. And sorry, I know I derailed us there a little bit.
No. I don't think we had too much to talk about on the quarterback chart. I guess I had one other player where Dobbs.
I was going to say Dobbs too, so keep going.
So I did notice that his yards per attempt continued to actually be quite a bit higher than his Arizona numbers. So he only got 1 touchdown, so his adjusted yards per attempt wasn't great, but his unadjusted yards per attempt was 7.9. which you can sort of see that puts him very much to the right-hand side of the chart. And I think with the knowledge that he's playing in a much better system with better supporting cast, that to me, that definitely qualifies him as sort of like a above average fantasy player, and sort of like, I feel strongly that the skill position of players around them can still perform very well as they have.
Yeah, agree wholeheartedly with you there. Let me hit you with a couple rapid fire comparisons, and obviously we'll ignore the week to week matchup type stuff, but just going forward rest of season, I want to ask you who you'd prefer just to roll out in a fantasy matchup. Josh Dobbs or Trevor Lawrence?
Ooh. I think feels bold, but it does feel like Dobbs.
It feels like Dobbs. If I were gonna pick a game where Trevor Lawrence has reminds us who he is game, this week looks like a nice spot for that. After getting their just turds push in against the 49ers, I kind of feel like this is all narrative based, so don't act on this at all. This is just stupid shit. But I feel like Doug Peterson might want to come out, get his quarterback some confidence, let him throw all over the Titans this week.
So are the Jags on the main site this week?
They are, yeah. It's Jags Titans. You can get Derrick Henry in the last round of dog bowl drafts. By the way, that feels like an interesting click.
So where does Lawrence go in the kind of
free?
He's just free, and so that might be an example of a pocket passer where they have huge week to week, and sometimes season to season volatility, where if you when you want to buy the pocket passes, you want it as cheap as possible. So honestly, free Trevor Lawrence sounds pretty enticing.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of good freebies this week. So another Josh Dobbs one. Josh Dobbs or Geno Smith?
Oh yeah, definitely Dobbs. I think Geno is like is actually the comp for Dobbs this year, except Dobbs he runs more, and it's a pretty good comp, except you get the rushing upside.
Okay, now we're going to get into the part of the chart where the guys have had a little bit better actual performance.
Right.
I mean, like Josh Dobbs, Baker Mayfield, I think you're still Dobbs going away, right?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, how about Josh Dobbs or Justin Herbert?
Ooh. I think that should just be Justin Herbert. Like,
I agree. I think it's still Herbert there, but it's like, isn't it funny that that's kind of close?
It's kind of close. It's kind of close. If somebody told me that next week Josh Dobbs outscores Trevor Lawrence, I'm just not shocked at all.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you have to go with Lawrence there, I think, just with the talent and pedigree.
Yeah, I don't think we need to spend very much time on the quarterback chart. We can move on to running backs now.
Yeah, I'm ready to move on as well. Oh, no, as always, I need to zoom out. Very specific 123% zoom. And so this is our running back snaps and usage chart. And so we've got rush attempts, routes, pass blocking, and run blocking. Those snaps as a percentage of team overall plays. And so obviously everybody understands why rushing attempts are useful. With the routes, the idea is that with this sort of very elite pass catchers, that it's sort of random when they get targeted, because it's usually not the play design. The check down to the running back is sort of the real play didn't work, so now this is our backup plan, and so you just want the guy out there running lots of routes, because that gives you the potential for those high target games. And pass blocking, just useful to know who's trusted as a pass blocker and who sort of isn't. So I have I've been keeping an eye on Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet for the last couple of weeks. And I'm ready to call the split to be a true 50-50 backfield between, in terms of snaps anyway, it's a true 50-50 backfield between Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet, where Kenneth Walker is clearly the preferred rusher, but Charbonnet is the preferred passing down back. Like, it just hasn't been, it's not close as to who's been used running routes and pass blocking. Am I missing something there?
No, it's really similar actually to the Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears split, where they're on the field about an equal amount of time. I feel like Spears, I actually would need to check the numbers on this to verify, but I believe Spears even gets a little bit more work. It's probably just because over a larger sample of weeks, Spears has been involved, and Charbonnet's involvement is a little bit more of a recent development. But the Spears Henry split is similar to the Charbonnet Walker split. I think Charbonnet is like a little less valuable for fantasy than Spears is. Just he's not getting a ton of touches, but he is getting a good, healthy amount of snaps. And so it's a little frustrating for Kenneth Walker. I mean, so much of Kenneth Walker's value is still in those home run type of runs, right, where he's breaking a big one.
I agree.
So I don't think it moves the needle so much for Kenneth Walker, in that maybe it's just making his floor a little bit worse. And Charbonnet, I still don't feel like, if I'm in a season-long league, like, are you ever considering starting Charbonnet, like, unless you just have no other options?
No, he's not startable. So just to put some context over, in the last 4 games, and this is the last 4 games where Charbonnet has been on the field 56% of the time. He's been on the field, and he's got 6.3 expected points per game. So he truly is getting a lot of sort of like calorie routes. And I'm not sure how much calories you burn on a running back route, but they're mostly not useful snaps, which it's more of a torn in Kenneth Walker's side than it is Charbonnet getting a real workload is how I would see it.
Well put. I think that's the best way to summarize that situation.
Which is really frustrating. I was really excited about Kenneth Walker's start to the year, but seeing Charbonnet just sort of command those routes and targets in a way that I think just caps Walker from delivering a true like ceiling season for him. It's frustrating, but is what it is.
Yeah, I this week made me think of we're going to have a reference that like 6 people end up getting here, but it made me think of the Michael Scott quote where he's like, never under any circumstance for any reason do anything to anybody ever. And I really thought that applied to drafting running backs. So never under any circumstance for any reason, no matter where you are in the draft, no matter what your team composition is, draft a running back for any reason ever. Is how This week of fantasy made me feel. Like, why am I spending premium capital on a running back when there's just like, I can get 30 carries from Devin Singletary, baby, and he's free.
Right. The contingent upside there for him has obviously been massive.
Yeah. It feel, and I mean, like, look at Rachaad White is the second best role in the NFL. And like, this guy was going in the 9th, 10th round, and like, does Rachaad
and no White sign of giving it up?
No. Does he give you anything sexy week over week? Hell no. He's going to get you 15, 20 carries on terrible efficiency, look bad doing it. But he is very adept in the passing. Like he's relatively smooth in the passing game. He's not, the best thing since sliced bread, but he's functional in the passing game, and they've got no reason to go away from him. And those touches are super valuable. So, I mean, yeah, Rachaad White is just like the safest floor play of all time, in my opinion.
Right. And he's definitely not a true double-double sort of player. I don't think anyway. But just because it had the offense is probably just a little bit too limited. And I don't think he has like that big a command on touches. He definitely has the command on touches, but he is truly important for them in the receiving and passing game. So he is sort of game script proof for sure.
Yeah. There's a couple guys up here in this top echelon of the chart with like elite roles that have spots. They've been yucky backs over the last couple weeks where like the public sentiment is going to be down on them, and it's reflected in their ADP on Underdog. I definitely can see this in the market that people aren't excited to have these guys, but that's both Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, both elite role. Like the Giants have nothing to do but put the ball in Saquon Barkley's belly. And, they're not going to, they probably don't get into a lot of touchdown scoring situations, but I mean, damn, if you want to get 20 touches guaranteed, like look no further than Saquon Barkley. And he goes pretty late. I mean, you can catch him sliding pretty far in some dog bowls. So he's interesting for sure. And then Josh Jacobs is like one of the clearest examples of, I feel like it's hard to even find spots like this in the NFL to like point this out, but motivated versus unmotivated players. Like you look at Josh Jacobs prior to the head coaching change, it was like, God, this guy is like so inefficient running the ball. He looks like he has for, his entire career outside of his super efficient last season. And then these last 2 weeks, you get Josh Jacobs, like actually he cares again. And he's like all of a sudden running hard. And, they were talking about, they're drawing up the run plays that he likes. They're going in the meeting rooms every week and they're like, what did you like? What didn't you like? And they're keeping all the stuff he liked and getting rid of the stuff he didn't. And it's like, just that having that buy-in from your players, like can really matter. So I'm pretty interested in a guy with a really good role that seems to care now and might truly a player with that dog in him where it could matter. We're not talking about a Jerry Jeudy type right here.
So my first reaction was to ask you, should Josh Jacobs be treated differently to Rachaad White?
Ooh. They're both pretty involved in the passing game. They both have really, really good workloads. Wow, that's a really good one. I would say like Josh Jacobs, I think he's just a better talent. And so like I'm a little bit more excited there, but I guess the offenses are both like leave a lot to be desired. Wow, that
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot
there. No, that's a good call out. I mean, I have based on my dog bowl exposures, I've been drafting both of those guys pretty aggressively because they both go late, and I think they both have
right ceilings. They both have a ceiling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the way I would think about it in my head is that Josh Jacobs is like Rachaad White is 95% Josh Jacobs. That it's I guess maybe Josh Jacobs is a better talent, but I don't think he's like is he truly like how is he above average? Is he like much above average? I think he's close enough to average that I don't want to call him like I don't want to give him too much of a boost for talent stuff.
No, I think you're right. It's like if he is better, how much does it even matter? Because like I think running back's the kind of position where it really only matters at the very extremes. So it's like, yeah, I've got this guy who might be like a C level talent at the position in Rachaad White, and this guy who's like a B level talent in Josh Jacobs. And it's like, there's actually no difference to what happens on the, with their production from a guy from B all the way down to D. You got to be
minus.
Yeah, you got to be an F to have it matter in the negative or an A for it to matter in the positive. So that was a great comparison. I thank you for pointing that one out.
Oh yeah. Enjoy talking about this stuff. I think it's a little bit interesting, right? That Alvin Kamara is sort of like sliding down the chart a little bit.
It is. He still caught, was it 7 balls this last week? Was involved in the passing game, but it does look like they're not as excited about his rushing contribution. Jamal Williams didn't really do anything. Taysom Hill didn't have a ton of work this week, but in the past couple weeks, it really looks like they're more looking at Taysom Hill to do the running game part of that role, and Kamara to be more of the passing game part. And Taysom still mixes in some for the passing game as well. So yeah, Kamara is less attractive to when he was
in the other stratosphere in terms of like expected points and like his snap rate. And now his expected point is still good. Last 2 weeks it's been around 14, 15, which is still good, still very good for where you drafted him. But it's definitely down.
Yeah, it's coming back to earth. And yeah, so let's think about Kamara with respect to a couple guys that are near him. Here's an interesting one. Do you want Alvin Kamara, who does nothing in the run game but is super involved in the passing game, or do you want Tony Pollard, who's been terribly inefficient and apparently is now phased out of the passing game more or less? Which guy do you prefer?
I'm like I want to pass because I'm so biased. Like I don't know how I got so biased against Tony Pollard this year, but I really am. I sort of think it is Alvin Kamara because at least he's doing stuff. I haven't really seen it. Has you watch all the Cowboys games? Is Tony Pollard doing anything?
He has like 3 or 4 plays a game where I'm like, that's the guy. Why isn't that happening more? But for just as you're getting the biased Cowboys homer takes, so here it comes. But I mean, I truly do try to be objective when I am thinking about the Cowboys because it's in the lens of thinking about fantasy football, and I don't want any bias to fuck up my process there. And so with respect to Tony, what I'm seeing as a non-ball knower is the running scheme looks way shittier than last season. Like there's a lot of Tony Pollard up the middle, and it's like that's not really where he had success last year. Like we had success getting Tony Pollard to the edge and using his speed.
So I saw a tweet today that was said Tony Pollard runs, his percentage of runs that were in between the tackles in 2022 was 42%, something like that. That's not exact, but it's in that neighborhood. And then in 2023, it was like 58% runs between the tackles, and that almost seems like I'm probably not saying this right, a Rorschach test, where like some people are like, okay, see, here it is. This is why he hasn't been playing well. But then I see it and I'm like, that fit doesn't feel like different enough for it to be causing this like dramatic decline in production and efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably partially the runs between the tackles and outside the tackle, but it's also that the runs outside the tackle, and this is where not being a ball knower really hinders my analysis, but someone who is a ball knower, let me know, like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? It looks like the run game in general for the Cowboys is just like there's not these big the line is no worse than it was last season. If anything, it's better. But last season there were lots of plays where it's like, oh my God, it's a 5-foot gap for Tony Pollard to run through. There's one defender that can make a play on him, and the whole play hinges on who wins, Tony Pollard or a linebacker. It's just a 1v1. If Tony wins, it's a 40-yard house call. If the linebacker wins, he still gashed him for 7 yards, And you saw those all the time last season, and that's how he ended up so efficient. I see those like not even once a game. Like if I see one of those, I'm like, oh my God, that looks like last season Tony Pollard, like where he's got one guy to beat. Like, oh man, just that shoestring tackle saved a big Tony Pollard touchdown. But I felt like we got that all the time last season, and we're really not seeing it now.
So here's a stat for you. Tony Pollard in 2023, his yards before contact 1.5, but 2022 his yards before contact 1.5, where he made a difference last year. And despite, I always thought the yards before contact thing being low for Pollard was like sort of a mini red flag, because those small, speedy guys, and I know he's not that small, but he has been like this kind of speed guy. Their yards before contact numbers are supposed to be good, because one of the advantages of being fast is that you're up the field before somebody can make a play. And his where he got his production was yards after contact stuff, and was true breaking tackles. Like he had a 22% evasion rate, whereas this year his evasion rate is just 10%, and his yards after contact is just, I went from 3.5 to 2.4. So maybe that's just too much being a nerd, but that truly, to me, points to like a player just playing worse.
Yeah, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that Tony Pollard is playing worse in 2023 than he is in 2022. What I would say, to add a little context to the broken tackle thing, is not all evaded tackles are created equal, right? Like, for example, last season, there were lots of evaded tackles that Tony Pollard registered where it was like a dude had an arm on him, and that's, and it's like,
right, he's in open space.
Yeah, and that's a Tony Pollard house call. And then this season, it's like, yeah, he's evading less, but it's like because the dude squared up on him. Like there's a linebacker in the hole, and he's not evading that.
I think that's partly running back skill, though.
I certainly think it could be partially running back skill.
Like being fast at the handoff, hitting the right hole. Not that he's hitting the wrong hole, but being fast at the handoff and getting down the field before somebody has had a chance to take a step, like that I think that's a really important part of the game.
100%. So to bring it to this week, what are your thoughts on Tony Pollard against a really bad Carolina run defense in a game where the Cowboys are going to be heavily favored? Is this, are we finally, I mean, I've heard a lot of it's do or die week for Tony Pollard this season. Is this the real do or die? Are you just out? Are you not, you're not riding the Tony train again?
Well, I guess I should self-admit that I was never riding the Tony train. But let's see. So, well, I guess part of the question is how much snaps is he losing? And so what's he at? He's still on the field 67% of the time since if you look at since week 7. And that compares to 69%. So his last 4 weeks are pretty in line with his snap percentage in for the last 4 weeks are pretty similar to the snap percentage for the full year. And then his last game, he was about 10% lower than the full season. So I guess I do have a hard time buying the lower snap percentage. What was what's his name, Rico Dowdle, in how much of that was like garbage time, and how much of that is
Dowdle seemed a little bit more involved even
before
garbage time, yeah, but I don't know how much of that is just like it didn't need to be garbage time for them to kind of feel secure in the game. It's I mean, they were playing the Giants, so it's a tough one.
Right. And when was their bye week? When was the
week
Cowboys?
7?
Week 7. So we're well past the bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there can be week-to-week fluctuations that we try to get in the heads of these NFL coaches, and we never will. So, Tim, I'm going to call – I personally would call the snap difference in a 1 week aberration. So I would say he still has the role. But me personally, I'm highly suspicious that he has lost a step. To me, the available data does suggest that he's lost a step. And with the way running back age works, where they just hit a cliff, I think I think that's where I'm at. Where I don't want to play a dusty running back unless I think I can. Unless I think a dusty running back upside is useful to me, and I don't think it is. Is it in the dog bowl? I'm not sure that it is.
I'll tell you what I wrote. So I like go over. I have some projections that I use and I aggregate and then make kind of my look at what I'm going to be doing this week. And I looked at where Tony Pollard came in on my projections and where he's being drafted. And I just wrote some notes on how I was wanting to attack it before I dove into any. And my note on Tony Pollard was, am I really doing the Tony Pollard thing again? So that that tells you where I'm at on him this week.
Right. And I think his for most of the year, if not all of it, his projection will be better than you being free in the dog bowl would suggest.
Yeah, he's certainly not free this week, so it's like that's even more reason to be scared. I mean, I think that people are doing the one last hurrah for Tony Pollard this week kind of thing. So
I mean, let me put it another way. I think I'd prefer Aaron Jones over Tony Pollard.
I would as well. I have Aaron Jones pretty high this week. Not to just give away all my alpha right away. I think I have Aaron Jones as like the 4th or 5th best running back on the slate.
Makes sense. I think he's an older player. He's still clearly got the juice. You need to stay away from the injuries and to get that production from him, but still clearly performing.
I got an interesting one. Older player, a little bit hampered by injury. How do we feel about Austin Ekeler this week, especially with I really look at Ekeler and Keenan Allen's production as pretty negatively correlated to each other, right? When you get Ekeler out, Keenan really feasts. When Keenan's out, Ekeler really takes a lot of that underneath type stuff. So Keenan's a little banged up this week. what do you think about Ekeler here?
I think even last week with the sort of good point production, he's still not actually playing that well. His expected point, he had a monster workload in week 10, but for someone who's been struggling coming off the injury, at minus 6.5 fantasy points under expected, to me that's still a little bit of a concern that he's not quite there off the injury. But then on the other hand, the fact that he's getting a monster workload, the Chargers know way better than me, looking at week to week sort of numbers, whether he's healthy or not. So I think that I think I'm more ready to buy the signal of Austin Ekeler getting the monster workload than the inefficiency. So to me, I'm like 90% sure that you should project Ekeler the way you did in week 1 this year or this week. I think that's where I'm at.
Note to self: don't fade Ekeler in dog bowl this week. I've got another guy that I just want to make sure didn't go under the radar for people that weren't masochists like myself and woke up at 6:30 a.m. to watch the Patriots and Colts game in Germany. But I mean, if you're not past the trade deadline in your leagues, please go try and get Jonathan Taylor. The Zach Moss experiment is over. They basically gave it all to Taylor, and he was against a pretty good Patriots run defense, so he didn't explode out of the box score or anything. But I believe he got 23 carries and a couple targets. So yeah, just truly elite workload.
He had 43% of the team snaps were rushes to Jonathan Taylor, and then 41% of those snaps he was running a route. So
pretty good.
It doesn't get that. That's the CMC right at the top of the chart. It literally doesn't get any better than that. He is an old school workhorse running back right now, or was in week 10.
So fantasy playoffs are coming. Let's throw a couple of these really crazy roll mixed with great talent guys here, and I want you to rank them for me. I mean, I think it's pretty clear CMC is going away as number 1, so let's keep him out of the equation.
Yeah.
But let's go Austin Ekeler, who you're saying is you're thinking back to full strength here. Then let's go Jonathan Taylor, and then let's throw in ETN in there, and then last, just to keep it interesting, we'll mix in Breece Hall. So how do you got those 4?
Ooh. I think I'm. That's really difficult. I think I'm between 2 and 3. I'm really close between Ekeler and JT. And part of that, if I was 100% sure it was week 1 projection for Ekeler, he's right. I think he's still decidedly ahead of JT. But I guess given that I'm not quite I don't think we can still be quite sure that he is. And the other thing that I think is important is that with the you still have a sort of pocket passer for the Colts. So with him getting those rush attempts and then running those routes, then that's actually something that I don't think JT has experienced a lot in his career. So to me, you actually do have outcomes there to get the true smash hammer upside. And I mean, I'm being a little bit wishy-washy. I'm still really close between that and Ekeler, where it's a great quarterback with a very fantasy friendly talent in Ekeler, where he breaks out the big runs, he gets a lot of targets, he does a lot with his targets. I'm honestly, I think that's I don't think I can pick. After that, I think I'm having a hard, and then I have a hard time between what's his name. Who's the Jaguars?
Etienne and Brees.
Etienne and Brees. Yeah, where Brees is definitely the better talent. He's clearly all the way back from the ACL surgery, but the Jets offense is we've just seen it in enough games now where you have that risk where the offense just tanks Brees, where even though he's clearly capable of doing those large breakaway runs that give you monster scores, and he's better. I think he's still better at that than Etienne, but Etienne it does play for a better offense, and I think that's another one where it's really close. And then who's the other guy? The last guy?
Those are it. So okay. Just to summarize, you'd say CMC tier, then we've got Ekeler Taylor tier, and then you've got Etienne Brees, and that's kind of the top 5.
Yeah, I think that I took a long time to get there to like a pretty simple answer, but I think that summarizes it pretty good.
I think the people like to hear you talk through it and think through it. So I certainly was glad to hear you do that. But I believe that's everything I wanted to look at on this first running back chart. Did you have anyone else, or should we move to the backups?
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Let's move on. And so, as you said, it's the same chart except we're dealing with backups here. And I guess the big question with playoffs approaching and sort of like trade deadline stuff, and I know FFPC waiver deadline is coming up. I think Ty Chandler is like the story of this chart, right?
100%. Yeah, it's like if you got anything left in the fab budget, you can just if you're in a league where you got to like do the defense juggling in the playoffs, or like not FFPC where waivers close. In FFPC, it's basically spend all your remaining budget on Ty Chandler is what I would be doing. And then I agree. For like home leagues where you got defense, or you might be trying to block your opponent from picking up a flex or something like that in the playoffs, leave yourself a couple bucks to do that. But like Ty Chandler is such a massive priority because the outcome where he is the Vikings lead running back for the rest of the season is relatively thin. You got a decent chance that it's this week he's that because of the concussion for Alexander Mattison. But there's a chance that he flashes enough this week and like earns more and just like, they clearly weren't happy with just Mattison. They brought in Akers, right? Like they're looking for something else. And Ty Chandler got work early in the game. Looked good. He's looked good on the limited opportunities he's had this season. So yeah, very, very much Ty Chandler is the highlight of this chart.
I'm glad you put it so strongly, because I think it's sort of worth honing in on, like the idea that you can potentially get somebody who can win a job the way that Ty Chandler could here this late in the year before week 11. Like that's just it doesn't happen that often. There's a scarcity there. So even with this sort of downside risk that he doesn't get there, the fact that you have that upside makes him so valuable because of the scarcity. And
it's too many boxes that he checks right now too for like things that we want, right? It's like on a good offense, they're pass first. He is explosive. He has breakaway play potential, in his outcomes. Thin competition ahead of him. Like it's like all systems go for like the type of guy that we should be targeting. And it doesn't matter that he's not going to hit, like 80-90% of the time, it just doesn't work out. And this specific season, this universe, this reality we live in, it's probably one where the Ty Chandler thing doesn't work out. But the small amount of times when it does, it's such a large gain for you that you make that bet. It's purely an expected value type of thing, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think the idea that the Vikings are just going to go back to bell cow Alexander Mattison, like I don't buy that at all. Like not at all. So I think that even in your like sort of like downside case, I still think you're looking at a pretty good shot at like a 60-40 with Titanic being the 40. And this being a valuable offense where we talk about the haves and the have not. Like your downside case being like a 30 to 40% guy in a have offense, that's not bad. Like for a zero, I think that's a 0 RB start, right?
Yeah, 100%. I know that we have an FFPC team that, Ty Chandler would be our best running back.
Right. So yeah, definitely feel strongly about that. And I think that's more of a game theory like call than a sort of stat call. Like everybody knows that he was much more involved last week. He played well last week with Madison. He got the goal line touchdown before Madison had the concussion, and then he played more because of the concussion. But it's definitely more of a game theory call than a stat call. But still, want to emphasize it.
Yeah, other guys that I wanted to run through here really quick, just like providing an update on Ravens backfield watch. Keaton Mitchell is like doing the things that he needs to do to, unseat Justice Hill.
Yeah,
it's looking like the most likely outcome here is disgusting 3-headed monster type backfield where you've got an electric player in Keaton Mitchell that could deliver a splash play for you and make him startable. I don't think the ceiling for Keaton Mitchell in any given week is ever going to get to anything that's ridiculously high, just because the opportunity is going to be so stymied by this 3-headed monster and the fact that you have Lamar that could hypothetically take some rushing touchdowns or, God forbid, throw for some passing touchdowns if things break his way. But I think the most likely outcome is that all these guys, Gus Edwards, Keaton Mitchell, Justice Hill, get nuked. I mean, Justice Hill's looking pretty nuked. It's not looking good for my boy. It's just, Keaton Mitchell is like slightly smaller but more explosive Justice Hill. And it's not like Justice Hill is such a large back anyway that's going to keep Keaton Mitchell off the field. They've got Gus Edwards to do big back kind of things. So, overall, just quick update on the Ravens. The other spot that I wanted to touch on was just David Montgomery is showing up on this chart just because he's coming back from injury and had a couple weeks. This is the rolling 4-week sample here for these guys. Just the quick thing I wanted to say about the Lions backfield is like in season long, you start your line. If you have a Lions running back on your team, it is always getting started. That team will score so many rushing touchdowns. It doesn't matter. You play. If you had both, you'd play both every week. You'd never decide like, do I want to bench Gibbs and play Montgomery? Do I want to bench Montgomery and play Gibbs? If you had both, you'd play both, and you will always play whichever one you have on your roster. It's just too good of an offense, too good of a scheme. Like they want to give their running backs the red or the green zone opportunities. So it's just like a dream. And the other thing is like this was so painfully obvious during draft season. Like I drafted a good amount of David Montgomery, drafted a good amount of Gibbs. But I should have been treating this backfield just like I treated the Dolphins backfield, where it's like every draft I get one of these running backs because it's just so clearly like the best rushing offense in the league. That offensive line is elite, and they love to run it. But their offense is good too. It's like not one of these love to run it teams like the Falcons, where it's like we love to run it and the offense sucks. It's like no, we love to run it. And the offense is awesome. So just had to make my quick Lions blurb there.
No, good call. Do not forget about David Montgomery. And so saw a note here from Historical Anomalies. I'm not sure we highlight these comments enough. So want to make sure I'm doing it. I think this is true. Ty did have another touchdown call back on a flag, which hopefully that makes him more attainable this week on waiver pickups.
Yeah, just that triggered something in my brain to go back to, touchdown called back or narrow miss touchdown. Kyler and Marquise Brown had a narrow miss that they almost hooked up on for a deep touchdown bomb. And I think if that happens, you see, Marquise Brown and Kyler being viewed a lot more favorably in the market this week.
Right.
So many people, like Trey McBride is projecting as the best tight end this week, which I think is valid. He's been a crusher, and we'll get to him. But I think there's more fragility in that projection than people are willing to admit. And they're crowning Trey McBride and just saying like, yeah, and you know, Hollywood's an afterthought. When I think that we'll get into it more when we talk about McBride. But anyway,
yeah, interesting teaser. But yeah, let's I think it's time to move on from this chart. And so anybody, I'm always a bit annoyed that we have two charts talking about running backs, and then we have two more charts talking about running backs.
Feels like a lot of running back charts.
Yeah, and want to make sure. I guess I want to make sure that where we touch on stuff here, it's stuff that makes more sense in the context of these charts than sort of rehashing points we've already had. Any of those sort of things sticking out to you? Where?
Yeah, quick. Just want to say this so I remember it. We're going to show the people how the sausage is made live on air here. What do you think about a chart update idea here? Might not be able to get to it before. Anyway, chart update.
Before the end of the year.
I combined the last two charts into this. And for the bubbles, right now I just have them filled with a random color to make it readable that guys are different colors. What if instead I filled them, they're all like each bubble is a pie chart. It's still got the size reference thing for fantasy points over expected, but I have like gray or black for snaps they're not on the field, and then those same colors of green and gold for the passing and rushing snaps. And so we've got these pie charts or kind of like Pac-Man looking charts where the larger the black or the bad color is when they're not on the field. And then we've got those same, I don't know.
It might be too busy. Glasses. I really like the idea of combining the two charts. My thought would actually be if we combine this chart with a table on expected points and fantasy points over expected, and that way you can see where and maybe you can have like, if you want, you can have like a table of rushing expected points, receiving expected points, then like a fantasy points over expected. So that way, I think that way you truly combine it all into one chart.
We definitely have some food for thought there, but I needed to say that. We'll go back and listen to this part of the podcast and figure out how we're going to doctor these charts up. But looking at the efficiency chart here, we've talked about this in that, you know, these charts are stabilizing more. Of course, these are the rolling 4-week charts. So like, for example, you can see Javonte Williams really catching some steam here and moving up into that 15 to 20 expected fantasy point. And rightfully so. When you look at his role that he had against the Bills last night, like that was, if you were a Javonte drafter or you got Javonte on your season-long team, you're really happy with this development. It looks like a really strong role for him. And he looks good. So that's pretty exciting. That was probably the biggest one that I wanted to call out. The Gibbs stuff is going to be interesting. I want to see more data points with Montgomery back to see, because Gibbs got, you know, those 2 touchdowns this week. One of them was in a spot where, like, I think a lot of the time in that scenario, that touchdown goes to Montgomery instead. But it felt like the offense was the team was trying to reward him for, he had a big play that looked like he broke the plane. He just barely didn't get in, and they kept him on the field to get the touchdown. Where I feel like a lot of the times when it's like, oh, we're at the 1 yard line, we're the Lions. It's like, yeah, and David Montgomery's going to come in and we're going to run 4 times, you know? So
right.
I'm not sure if he ran a little hot and like he got a situation where typically he
how sticky is it that Jameer was getting that sort of goal line touch?
Right. Thank you for saying what I was trying to say in a much more concise way.
No, we're all trying to make it work. And
other guys. Oh, sorry. Did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that it truly bears waiting and watching for another week to see if that split holds up. I mean, I'm still sort of holding on to my prior that they want David Montgomery to be the main guy. And I'm guessing that I'm speculating that the injury and coming off the injury was a big part of the split where Gibbs was getting the majority of the snaps and the touches. But definitely interesting that it happened and truly worth watching to see if it continues. And I think if we get another game of that, then it's just Gibbs season.
Yeah, that's a good call. Casey had a comment that I want to clarify for people because these charts are not terribly intuitive with how we have them broken up. These running back efficiency charts and expected points, we split them into two charts because the sheer number of data points is so much that it would get really crowded if I combined them all. And so Rachaad White is not on this first chart. He's on the second chart. The charts are just split kind of arbitrarily. It's evens and odds where I've ranked all the players based on expected fantasy points and said the guys who are ranked 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. The odds, those all go on one chart. The guys who are the evens go on another chart. It's just so the charts are a little bit more readable. But we'll touch on the Rachaad White, Josh Jacobs discussion in a second. We don't have a ton that we need to stay on this chart for. There's two quick guys I want to hit on. Number one is Breece Hall. With the development of Michael Carter getting cut from the team and being the thorn in the side for Breece for the passing down, long down, and distance back, I think that's a really bullish sign. You did see Dalvin Cook more involved in this most recent game, and Dalvin was hyped. And he was running hard, man. I honestly think that, like, for getting the most out of the player, like, was it smart to give Dalvin the contract they gave him? Hell no. Has he been good? Hell no. But this last game, like, you know, we're getting out of the analytics world and into the narrative world here a little bit. But, like, the dude was trying hard. You could tell, like, he ran hard on a run, got a good gain, and he got up and he was, like, yelling at the bench. Like, dude is fired up. He's clearly a competitor. Like, he wants to play. He's not out there just to collect the check. Like, he cares still, you know? And so that, as silly as that is, it does matter to this stuff. Like, it matters to the coaches, certainly. So I don't think we're going to see, oh, Michael Carter gone, Breece Hall 100% of snaps. Now you're just going to be frustrated at the Dalvin Cook usage. But I do think that there is a little bit of runway here for Breece to earn more of that passing game work. And then the other two guys are right on that 10 to 15 fantasy point border. They're both right about 10 expected fantasy points backs. And that's Jaylen Warren and Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson with a couple long breakaway, receptions this last week. Don't think that's necessarily repeatable. But yeah, it's just he's like your beautiful zero RB baby. Like, if you drafted Brian Robinson on a zero RB team, my goodness, that's like everything you could ask for. He's filling in your roster, making sure you're not taking zeros, you're putting up respectable scores a lot of weeks. Brian Robinson turning into an awesome pick there, even though the ceiling isn't so crazy. He's splitting a lot of stuff with Gibson. Gibson's getting a lot of high value touches still. But yeah, I just wanted to call out Brian Robinson there. And then Jaylen Warren getting the official nod from the team as now he is the lead back on the team. I think it's like, it's kind of like lead back in name only, right? Like, is it really that different than what we were already doing? Like, I know that he got a couple more carries this week than he had, compared to his average touches. So I think it moves the needle a little bit, but I think it was like, this already was the thing, like we just put a label on it. Jaylen Warren and Mike Tomlin, they were talking before, but now they're officially dating. Like they just finally put a label on it,
Yeah, I think that they were already sort of pretty close to 50-50, and now they were like 55-45. Jaylen Warren's probably gone from the 45 to the 55. So maybe it means a little bit more, but like you said, they were already there. It's just them like acknowledging what was already reality.
So let's flip to this next chart and take a little mental snapshot of where Josh Jacobs is. So he's about 12 expected fantasy points on the ground. He's got just shy of 4 expected fantasy points, or right about 4 expected through the air there. So sitting around 16 expected fantasy points. And we'll do a little Rachaad White comparison. What do you know? It's Drico with an incredible call. They're the same player. Rachaad White with higher expected receiving fantasy points. Now the tricky part of that comparison is with Jimmy Garoppolo. There was a lot of checkdowns to Josh Jacobs. So I'm wondering how sticky do you think? Or I guess over the last couple of weeks he's had less expected fantasy points in the passing game. Do you think that's a trend like that we should be paying attention to? Hey, without Jimmy Garoppolo, Josh Jacobs' role in the passing game is a little lighter. Do you think it's just noise over the last couple of weeks? How do you think that shakes out for that comparison?
I mean, it's hard to call. Like, I want to say it feels a little bit like the well, especially last week with the Las Vegas. They played. It seemed like they played a pretty short game, like pretty short, shitty game. So that's one of those games where there's less snaps going overall. So I think that will depress expected points. But let me just pull up the week by week and sort of rather than. So yeah, last week he had 15.8, and to me that doesn't feel terribly sticky in it being low, just because it was one of those games where there was a lot of rushes, both offenses being bad, so fewer snaps overall. Whereas week 9 it was 19 expected points, and that's when they blew out the Giants. So he had no expected receiving points, but 19 expected rushing points. And then 16.4 in week 8, 15.3 week 7, and he did have 20.6 before that, 22.6. So I mean, I guess it also depends. So it's definitely lower. Definitely feel that trend lower. I guess the other question is that because Josh Jacobs is he getting a lower split? And I apologize that I'm sort of like figuring out the answer to this as I'm talking. Is there somebody else getting splits? And that's not really true, I don't think. It's not that somebody else is taking off work from Jacobs. It's that the offense has been, there's been the pie that Josh Jacob, his percentage of the pie is about the same, but the pie is smaller. And is that something that's sort of sticky? I guess probably not. Like, I want to say that the Las Vegas offense, they're going to have their ups and downs. But they also feel like a little bit of a have-not offense. So I guess the answer is I think I'm my guess, not my guess. From looking at the data, I think that it's more likely than not that Josh Jacobs' expected points coming down is more to do with the offensive situation than his role, and that should the offense get a more fantasy, be a fantasy-rich environment, that he'll still benefit disproportionately like he has previously. But I guess you just have to see that, and I guess I think they are a little bit of a have-not offense, but they're not so terrible. It's not like they're so bereft of weapons that they will just be like, it's just going to be a dogmire the whole way. So I think you probably can expect at least 1 or 2 big expected point games from Josh Jacobs, and we'll see if he can convert those into actual big point games.
So let's tie a bow on this Rachaad White, Josh Jacobs, because I think that was such an interesting comparison that you made. But I really want to analyze it through the context of this week specifically, so that people have a an actionable takeaway if you're drafting dog bowls or, thinking about it for DFS. So Rachaad White gets the 49ers, who we just saw, absolutely snuff out all of my, 30-something% Travis Etienne dog bowl teams from the last week. And they put a candle on that, or they put a cover on that candle real quick. And Travis Etienne was pretty dead in the water there. That 49ers defense was very formidable against the running back position this past week. So you got Rachaad White, who's not a great runner going into that, but he, a lot of his expected fantasy points are coming in the passing game, where if they are trailing the 49ers, he's not going to get game scripted out. On the other side of the coin, you got Josh Jacobs against the Dolphins. I believe they're at Miami, but they've got, an opponent who could very much push them, put them in a negative game script. Now, I know we've seen Jacobs kind of get game scripted out, which is weird given his involvement in the passing game. But what do you think here? Do you prefer Jacobs against a slightly more vulnerable Miami defense in a game that there should be a lot of points scored on the other side? Or do you prefer Rachaad White against a very formidable 49ers defense? Also, probably a lot of points coming from that Oppo offense there.
This truly feels like a gun to my head. I mean, both of those feel kind of like gross, right? Whereas 49ers, like you said, given the framing that they just slammed ETN down, but I guess maybe with some further context is that like the 49ers offense hasn't been invulnerable. Like there's been offenses that have put up points against them. And with Rachaad White, not a great talent. So like average at best talent. The Tampa Bay offense being an average at best offense, and 49ers being an elite defense, I guess you would lean the balance of probabilities that they sort of like just crushed them. And then it's really I don't want to say that like Dolphins defense is just like a punching bag. I don't think it has been. But it's definitely not the 49ers, that's for sure. And so I think you probably do lean Jacobs there, whereas I guess just because maybe just slightly on defensive matchups. I mean, that doesn't feel like a great reason to lean one player or another. You like the defensive matchup a bit better because that stuff is so volatile, it's so random that like it can just be wrong. But I think you probably do give a slight lean with them being very similar players and maybe even offenses in terms of like their expected points and stuff like that. That you probably just give the slight lean to the defense, but caveated with strong price sensitivity, strong like ownership sensitivity, so stuff like that. That like if like Josh Jacobs was way more expensive than Rachaad White just because of a defensive difference, then it would be Rachaad White. But in a vacuum, all else equal, would slightly lean Josh Jacobs.
Okay. And then let's just expand on that and say, because it is clear you don't have a strong lean between those guys. They're relatively similar. It's more about price sensitivity. What do you think about Aaron Jones versus both of those two? You prefer Jones? He's got the Chargers this week, who just got ran all over by, granted, one of the best run games in the league, but
that does feel a bit better, right?
I agree. Yeah.
You have the more explosive player, and I think he's just as important to the offense. They really don't like AJ Dillon, so I think that's where I would go. Yeah,
and then I'm pretty sure you'll say Aaron Jones over this other player. You would take Aaron Jones over Saquon Barkley, I'm assuming, without too much thought.
Yeah, it feels right.
But then Saquon in that Rachaad White and Josh Jacobs triumvirate of yuckiness. Do you have?
Oh my God, you are just making me fucking deep dive.
Making you earn it this week, Drico.
I'm like swimming through garbage. Like I just dumped in the dives in the dumpster, dived in the dumpster, dumped in the divester, and I'm swimming. I mean, am I allowed to say those are just truly all gross? And you need a lot. If you're playing any of them, you need an awful lot of luck to go on your side, and that it's hard. That's hard to pin down what you want. Is that too much of a cop out?
That's fair. So, but I think the takeaway that we can give people then is those three are kind of a similar tier. So maybe, say for example, you're sitting there in the dog bowl and you aggressively attacked a receiver early this week because, from what I'm seeing, that seems to be a sharp way to play this week, the way the slate plays out. And you're sitting here and those three backs are available, and you could either take the first of those three backs or you could prioritize your quarterback or tight end. If you thought one of those would make it back to you, you'd be totally fine just taking whoever the market gave you out of those three.
Yeah, totally.
All right. I think we spent enough time on running backs here. Let's hit the.
You know who I want more than all of them? Devin Singletary, baby.
Oh my God, your Devin Singletary love is unparalleled.
And that's a little bit of a joke. I think that he's at least a lot closer to them. Assuming Dameon Pierce doesn't play, I don't think he's any different in play to them.
Wow. That's a strong endorsement for Devin Singletary.
All I'm saying is I think he's in that tier, which honestly it says a lot about. I think it says a lot about what I think about that tier as well.
That's also true.
So here we have the tight end utilization and efficiency chart, and this is our sort of starting tight ends, and we've sorted this by route percentage, and obviously, with the way different offenses use their tight ends, what you want is a tight end that's running a lot of routes, not having to pass block a lot, and then you also want the tight end on a team where they're just using one guy all the time. Like you can have offenses where tight ends are involved, but if they split it between three different guys, it's not that helpful. So that's why it's quite valuable to see the routes as a percentage of team drop back, and then you want to see guys who are getting down the field targets, much more helpful than sort of like short dump offs, and you also want to see what rate they're getting targeted at per route. So targets per run is that percentage, and again, I think it's really interesting seeing Dalton Schultz sort of like catapult into the top part of this chart, just because it seemed like early in the offseason, or later in the offseason and the preseason, and even going into the season, I wouldn't have expected him to be like a true starter, getting 20% targets per run, like 8.2 ADOT, like that feels like Dalton Schultz belongs in like maybe like top 6, top 10 tight ends rest of the year.
Yeah, I know most people probably aren't going to go back and unearth their own worst takes, but yeah, definitely don't go listen to like week 1 or week 2 of Stat Chasing, where I believe I said to the effect of, if you drafted Dalton Schultz, he's a 0 for the rest of the year for you. So definitely don't listen to that. Yeah, Dalton Schultz's role has certainly grown as the season has progressed. I do think that he and Nico Collins are likely negatively correlated in that they both are operating kind of in that middle of the field, quadrant. And so I think that when Nico is active, it probably hurts Schultz a little bit. I would want to see, it's too small a sample to actually even know this season. But like, I would bet you that Schultz and Collins are negatively correlated. And so if I'm ever playing like CJ Stroud doubles, I I mean, I wouldn't go out of my way to avoid pairing those two. But like if there were other factors like a salary discount in DFS or an ownership discount or, major ADP differences or things like that, where I can, if I'm going for a CJ Stroud double, I'm probably having like a slight tiebreaker against doubling with Schultz and Collins. Just like a small little micro thing that could be totally wrong. but that's in my brain. That's how I'm viewing it right now. There's maybe a slight negative correlation there between those guys.
That makes sense, and so I guess we should address our cover bite here, where you said that his Trey McBride, his very strong production last week is perhaps a bit fragile.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we're seeing the breakout happen. Like 27% targets per route run is elite. 7.3 ADOT is very good, especially for, it's not one of the highest ones, but when you get 27% targets per route run, doesn't matter. You can have a much lower ADOT and still be a crusher. This is actually what we saw early this season, like same targets per route run, similar ADOT, I think a little lower ADOT for Jake Ferguson. But this is what we saw from Jake Ferguson in the first couple weeks that kind of perked our antennas up for him. We're like, whoa, this guy, he wasn't running as many, he wasn't on the field as much as McBride. But when he was getting targeted at this rate. And so and Trey McBride looks like, he looks like the real deal. So I'm not trying to poo-poo all over Trey McBride when I say that the projection of him being the highest projected tight end on the main slate this week is fragile. This is the second game the dude has played with Kyler this season, and last season, like, I don't think he played a ton while Kyler was healthy. I think he got some run, but like you're still in you got a relatively small sample here of Trey McBride working with Kyler. And I don't think that it's a given that he's locked in the number one option on the offense. I mean, do I want to play McBride and Kyler stacks this week? Hell yeah. I'm going to do it a lot, but I think in the same vein, you need to be willing to do Kyler and Hollywood. And I think even like, I'm trying to remember how cheap Rondale Moore is. I did a very early cursory look at prices on DraftKings. But Rondale Moore I think he's like, if he's not Stoneman, he's like 33 or 3,400 or something, I want to say. And that's interesting to me too. So I think attacking the whole game environment is interesting this week. But bringing it all back to Trey McBride, rest of season outlook looks elite. He'll be a tight end one rest of season. But and
just to acknowledge, we as soon as Zach Ertz went down, we called top 6 tight end rest of the year, and not that we want to, but just to contextualize it, we have been very big very bullish on Trey McBride.
That's good stuff, Draco. You got to mix our victory laps in there to offset my dog shit Dalton Schultz takes. So we just kind of got to layer those in. We're giving you the good and the bad here. But yeah, we're clearly very bullish on Trey McBride. I got a lot in my best ball bags. I like, he's very exciting for the rest of the season. I'm just saying, like, when you get this level, we're going to go through the Trey McBride irrational exuberance period in the market right now, because he is the hot young thing. Like, just watch like the lead up to this week, like all the DFS shows and everything. Like, you're going to get some Trey McBride chatter, just wait for it. And all I'm saying is be willing to get a little different than the market. If Trey McBride's going to come in as like far and away the most common way to play Kyler this week, I'm willing to do a little different. Not that I'm full fading McBride. Like I'm going to play a bunch of it. I think there's a lot of meat on the bone potentially with how excited people are going to be for him this week. That's all.
Right. So what you're saying is you do actually agree with a high projection for McBride.
Yeah, he should. Like, there's good reason to be excited for McBride, right? He looks great. The role is great. Like, it's all systems go. It's just that when you get the market behaving like this on a player where everyone's so like Trey McBride's going like, I think I saw him go 1-2 turn in a dog bowl today.
Jesus.
Like, dude, Trey McBride is, Jesus Christ himself, apparently, according to the market right now. Like,
So
they fully expect him to walk on water this Sunday.
So the what's the $100 contest that's the main small field, the single entry
On DK, the spy.
the spy, yeah. So what ownership would
Ooh.
do you think
God,
is like efficient?
it's so
ownership?
early, and he's not priced down a ton. I think he's a low 4K kind of guy, but
4,400.
4,400. Ooh, I haven't.
And
I
then
haven't looked
Laporte is 58, Schultz is 5,000, Kittle is 64, Kincaid is 49.
Oh God, you're gonna get. All right, This is don't have
not your prediction. I'm not asking you to predict ownership. I'm asking what you think ownership should be.
Oh, what should it be? Oh,
Yeah.
Efficient ownership for him is probably like in the high 30s. Like, I would say.
So
yeah.
Again, to bring further nuance to your point, you think he's a smash play, but
he's a giga smash. Yeah.
like the field is going to be so over on what is it actually like any tight end game to game is fragile because the way the distribution of their scoring often works is that they have the huge games, they have and then they can often have times have like smaller games, and I'm not so sure that that's how it works for Trey McBride, given how because I'm looking at it here. Just to tie back to the stat chasing stuff, like he was definitely not a starter until week 8, and then from there his route percentage was 88%. His target route per route run was 39%. Week 9, 63% target route percentage. Only 25% targets per run, and then last week 78%, 32% target per run. So I think there is something there that as he's played more, his targets per run has actually come in a little higher than his full season stuff. So I think that I think there's actually an argument to be made that he is a true sort of ball hog, but when you're talking about something where the sample size is still pretty small, that people are playing it as if it's definitely that way, that maybe there's some leverage on it. That's the point, right?
Yeah. Yep. And just if you want a place where you could potentially pivot this week to get another exciting tight end that looks good in this tight end usage chart, could deliver a big spike week, has already done it a couple times this season. And you could also pair with a quarterback with rushing upside in a pretty condensed target tree offense. I think playing Cole Kmet and Justin Fields in his first game back against a Detroit team that Detroit can score a lot of points. And so if you get a game where they're able to go back and forth, I think that the Fields and Kmet route to play it, and then maybe you get a little even stronger leverage off McBride and play like a Hollywood Brown or a full punt Rondale Moore at 3,300 or whatever, because projections, Casey's on the same page with me here, projections wise, there's never in a million years that you could get to Rondale Moore instead of Trey McBride on this Cardinals side of that game, right? You're just never getting there. And so if McBride really comes in as steamed as he does, and you're looking for a punt play, I mean, Rondale Moore might be too thin. Maybe you got to do like a Hollywood Brown in low 5Ks for him. But the point is there's ways to lever off McBride. I think there's other really interesting tight end plays on the slate. And I think that you can pair it with another quarterback that could do the type of stuff that Kyler can do. As far as his single game ceiling, I like having those onesie positions with the really strong correlation to their ceilings. Tight end and quarterback correlation is really nice with so much of their production oftentimes coming from touchdowns. So anyway, that's my rambling bit on how we could potentially play the Trey McBride situation this week.
Makes sense. So I don't think there's a whole lot other surprising stuff here. Like the thing that strikes my eye the most is you're still seeing Michael Mayer stuck around this sort of 60% rate. His targets per run like far from elite. So I think we were on sort of breakout watch for Mayer, and I think we should still be on breakout watch, but definitely not there yet at all.
Yep,
like definitely
agree.
Is a desperation start, if that, at tight end.
Yeah, Meyer's just going to be the random rookie tight end that goes off in the fantasy playoffs, and everyone's like, we knew he could do it. And he ends up being a good best ball pick because his spike week is week 16, you know?
Right.
I see it in my mind's eye.
Yeah. Here's hoping anyway. And so unless you have any objections, let's move on to the backup.
Yeah, let's hit it.
And oh my god, I'm not seeing a whole lot of reason to stay on this chart very long.
No, it's Joever for Irv Smith. He's like not even running the most routes for the Bengals, so like
Great call.
Just for everyone, I'm saying this for me as much as for everyone else. We never need to draft Irv Smith again. There were lots of years where we did the Irv Smith thing because he looked exciting and injury derailed him. And, this is going to be the year. Tight ends can bloom late. Irv Smith, we never need to do it again. We're good. This can be the last time that Irv hurts you. So I needed to say that really for me. Just
right.
This is a random, not useful to anyone except like the most absolute sick degenerates. But Lucas Kroll, Broncos tight end, actually like got on the field, did the stuff that like you would hope a Greg Dulcich does, and that he's like running some downfield routes. They had him on a wheel route. Anyway, Lucas Kroll had like a full-on zero gooser projection and like every projection source for Showdown Slate last night. And it was one where I noticed just watching the game, like that's one where the projection, the people that are really good at doing projections didn't have this role that the Broncos clearly, like this was a spot that the Broncos had in mind when they elevated him. Like, we need this guy to do this thing. And for me, what it actually did was like gave me a little bit of hope that Dulcich could deliver. I'm literally talking like 1 week. Like I might get one spike week from Dulcich when he comes back. But it looked like
this feels like a showdown take.
Exactly. That's really what it is. It's like I saw Lucas Kroll at $200 Stone Min projected for full gooses, and then I saw what he actually did in the game, and I was like, it should have been like a projection of 1, or 0.8, but it shouldn't have been 0. It should have been someone that if you're 150 maxing and you're looking for unique lineups, you should have played some Lucas Kroll. And I did not, but I filed that away in my mental filing cabinet.
So you won't have to file it very long because the Broncos host the Vikings on Sunday Night Football this week.
Well, so here's to hoping.
So if you see Lucas Kroll catch a touchdown this week, sacrilegious is dancing.
Oh boy. But yeah, that's all the time and mental energy we need to spend on this backup tight end chart.
Don't need to tell me twice. And so this, I feel like the wide receiver chart is another one where it gets it's pretty stable, but I see we have a new entrant here of Jalen Naylor, who ran 95.
I hardly know her.
He ran 95 to 100% of routes, but is a true, like, he is like he is the president of the cardio club. Like, he is the CEO. I'm almost wonder if he's somebody that we should exclude from the chart.
We should exclude him from the chart. But, man, I was talking shit on Alec Pierce doing the wind sprint thing last week, and Jalen Naylor said, "Hold my beer. I got this. I'm the wind sprint king. So yeah, Jalen Naylor, you're only going to see him once, guys. He'll get excluded next week. But talking about more relevant fantasy players, just music to my ears and warming my heart. Adam Thielen continues to regress in the fantasy points department. Beautiful, beautiful thing. You love to see it. It was just so painful to watch the Slappies getting there for so long this season, but it truly looks like he is coming back down to earth and not running hotter than the sun anymore. Got an interesting one for you. How do we feel about Diontae Johnson as a little positive regression candidate here?
I'm going to be a little bit bold here and say that I think Diontae sort of belongs in the earns targets, doesn't score points quadrant of the chart. Now, this, like, I want to preface this with saying I think he should be better than, 8 points a game. So I think you do have positive regression coming there. But I'm going to say again, I think that he profiles as a player who's almost always going to get strong targets, but underperform those targets. And it's just who he's sort of been his entire career. Or am I being a bit too grinchy there?
I got to push back a little bit. He had a couple pretty good weeks here. I think he put together like an 18-point performance, and like he had some weeks where you would have been very happy to have started him. This last
right. I'm not saying that he can't score 18 points in a game.
Yeah,
just that I don't think he's ever going to average above. I think it's very hard for me to see him averaging like above 15 points a game.
That's fair.
That's a big stretch. Not that he can't do it for 3 games or whatever.
That's fair. Yeah. So let's pick some guys that are similar in weighted targets per route run here, like DK Metcalf or Diontae.
It has to be DK, right?
I'm not so sure on that one. So watching the Seahawks this last week against what's one of the worst pass defenses in the league, like, yes, the counting stats got there by the end of the game, right? But for a lot of that game, I was just watching it thinking, how is the Seahawks passing attack this poor? You know, like, there was a long stretch of that game where they just weren't really doing anything. Like, and it's so split. Like, yeah, Tyler Lockett had a good game, but like, I feel like it's really just like DK, Tyler, JSN now are all like eating into the pie enough. And I just, Geno hasn't been very good this season. I mean, and this was the spot, you know, like Geno was Pat's cover boy on his walkthrough this week. Like, I really loved the spot. I played a good amount of Geno and Dog Bowl. I attacked that game pretty aggressively. And to me, I just, you know, in seeing it, I was left wondering if maybe the Seahawks passing game is just not very good. And that's not to say that the Steelers passing game is very good, but it's like Diontae is earning so much there, you know, compared to like the splits for Pickens with and without Diontae are pretty stark. Like, Pickens is really suffering from Diontae coming back. And so I'm just a little curious there, but it's clear you prefer DK to Diontae there. What about Godwin versus Diontae?
I think that those are pretty similar players.
Okay.
And I think Godwin is probably, like, if you're looking for a regression, you're probably looking at something close to what Godwin has been producing for Diontae. But it definitely seems like the Tampa Bay offense has been more functional than Pittsburgh.
This is one of those interesting spots where for me personally, I really try to fade like any coach related narrative or like production adjustment that we're applying to players during the off season, because, like, guys, the coaches take 0 snaps. You know, like I've never seen Canales get out there on the field for the Bucs and take a snap. But gosh darn it, like, the Seahawks offense looks a lot worse without him, and the Bucs defense looks pretty good with him, like for what the Bucs are. Like I think everyone expected the Bucs to be like basement dwellers this season, and Mike Evans is out here doing Mike Evans shit, guys, and like Chris Godwin's suffering a little bit because of that. It's like so much heavily going to Mike Evans and less to Godwin this season, but it's like, and you got Rachaad White with an incredible role, like very functional, like fantasy option. So I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is there are these outlier coaches or offensive coordinators where it's like, if you're able to identify the guys that are actual legitimate difference makers for putting their players in positions to succeed for fantasy, I think that's pretty important. And then for everyone else, you just need to not listen to anything that's coach related because it doesn't move the needle except outside of this handful of guys.
I think it's like the ladder grade system you were talking about before. Like an A coach makes a difference and an F coach makes a difference, but the difference between like a B coach and a D coach is like it's almost nothing in terms of fantasy.
I'm literally making a mental note of that right now because like going into best ball season every year, I have like a Google sheet of stuff that I wanted to remember, and I write down and I like go through kind of some preliminary rankings that I do before I just like aggregate all the rankings that I use and then like use that to help me when I'm drafting. But I try to get my own thoughts down first. I'm definitely putting that in there. A's and F's make differences, and everything in the middle you can kind of tune out and just it's fine for those.
Yeah, that's definitely been something where I found like people get too fixated on like the stuff in the middle.
Two other guys I wanted to touch on here. I guess there's technically a third I should probably hit on, but two college teammates, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Garrett Wilson, just from the sheer fact that like, dude, imagine if it was anyone other than Zach Wilson. He's getting insane target volume. Like he's catching balls that are just like horribly late or behind him or sailing over. Like, I don't know if you watched their game, but Zach Wilson sails him. It's like way over his head. And the dude just like jumps 3 feet in the air straight up. And it looks like a no effort kind of play. I had to go back and look at that replay. It's like, did he jump as high as I thought he jumped? Or was that like an optical illusion? He just like went straight up in the air after this entirely errant pass. Oh my God. Garrett Wilson is so good. If the Jets have any kind of quarterback situation next season that's not Zach Wilson, you can catch me drafting Garrett Wilson probably top 6, top 7 overall. Like if Garrett Wilson's going in the second round, I'll be 100% Garrett Wilson is what I'll say. Literally, I will be 100%. Don't care. I'm down.
If he's in the second round next year?
If he's in the second next year, I'm 100% Garrett Wilson.
And that's on the sort of the idea that Zach Wilson being the quarterback next year or anybody as bad as Zach Wilson is just like not a viable. It cannot be true.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, if we're rolling into next season, it's like Aaron Rodgers retired and the Jets say they're sticking with Zach Wilson, then I'm not 100% Garrett Wilson, to be perfectly clear. Like, but if it's anyone whatsoever that is the quarterback that's at all, like if Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback next year,
right,
I'm 100% Garrett Wilson in round 2. The other guy, Chris Olave, also got a I hate to trash on Derek Carr because I think he gets a lot of unfair hate. But, man, Jameis Winston coming in and all of a sudden, like, making Chris Olave look like a real boy again does kind of bode poorly for Derek Carr. So,
well, in fairness, Jameis is like a fantasy kingmaker.
That's
where,
true.
Like, he's so aggressive. He's so willing to throw the ball down the field and over and over again that he does make players look very good. The problem is when he throws the 3 interceptions in a game and then the coaches don't trust him and whatnot. But
Did you see his target to Rashid Shaheed in, I want to say there were 3 defenders in immediate proximity. And
I saw the one where he threw it all the way across the field to like A.T. Perry.
No, that was another sick one. That was like, you never do this, but sick play, Jameis.
Right.
No, the Rashid Shaheed one was an interception. It was like, that is I've seen Jameis do that a million times in a Bucs uniform. That's what I needed. Inject that shit straight into my veins. Like, I'm here for Jameis Winston making god-awful decisions, but it's very fun to watch.
He is one of those players that makes football fun.
Yeah.
But definitely, it's a little concerning that Olave looks so good with Jameis out there. But at the same time, do want to be a little bit cautious that Jameis is like he's a true kingmaker, and I really hope for Olave's sake that Jameis plays a lot more games throughout the year. But to me, it's maybe a small negative on Carr, but not a huge one.
Okay. Those were all my last. I'm gonna hit you with a 2-second blurb. Michael Pittman. Just incredible role, tons of volume, looks really good. Downs was out this week, and so Michael Pittman just got it all. Or he wasn't out, but he was pretty limited with the knee. He got a little bit of work, but nowhere near what he typically would get. So Pittman is just like gonna forever be in that echelon of like, I would probably say like, matchup agnostic. I'm looking at him as like slightly better than Chris Godwin. Like probably in, squarely in, I mean, shoot, it's just the guys that he's around on the chart. He's like right in that Christian Kirk, probably like a little bit lighter than Christian Kirk, better than Jacoby Myers type range of player, but very, very usable for fantasy. Yeah,
agreed. Where he's definitely earned a consistently high target share. And in week 10, his target per run was like 42%. No, that's not nowhere near his season average, which is 25%. But that's a pretty healthy, pretty strong targets per run. He definitely dominates targets for sure. And I think we should be keeping that in mind in future years. Maybe. I want to be a little bit conscious on the price, but should be keeping that in mind that he is a target dominator.
Yeah, as we roll to the next chart here, I'll just say with the hindsight of seeing how this season played out and what we saw from Anthony Richardson as a passer, the Michael Pittman price just wasn't correct. It was way too low. The market was over-correcting for the risk of Anthony Richardson being a bad passer and undervaluing how good the role was for Pittman. And so that's just something that I want to remember for next season, that if I'm getting, like 7th round Michael Pittman, that's one where I got to be willing to just say, hey, it's too many targets. Like, I'm just going to take it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And especially in an environment where other receivers are getting priced up, if he's not getting that same treatment, it makes a lot more sense to take him.
Yep.
So like you alluded to, let's move on to the Tyreek Hill chart. Same effect that we had on the last chart, but the exact opposite, where he's just far and away to the top and right.
So Tyreek Hill is the inverse Jalen Naylor.
Pretty much. Like Jalen Naylor had Naylor, I should say. He had 1 target for 3 air yards. Tyreek Hill has like 1 million targets for 1 billion air yards.
And I believe those numbers are accurate. 1 million.
Right. I counted.
Yeah. The guys on this chart, I mean, so Tank Dell, graduate from the backups wide receiver chart, or the low route rate chart guys from earlier in the season, truly looking like a breakout rookie wide receiver, looking awesome. earned just an insane amount of volume with Nico Collins out this last week. Wasn't able to convert it into quite as an impressive. If I told you that he was going to get 15 targets, you'd be like, oh my God, did Tank Dell go for 40? But he, a lot of them just narrow misses, wasn't able to hook up. But you gotta, if you have Tank Dell in best ball, congratulations, that's a fantastic pick. My mental note that I'm making on Tank Dell, small wide receivers, and rookie wide receivers in general is the market isn't great at pricing these rookie wide receivers that end up getting opportunity on their teams, like Puka Nacua, Tank Dell, and extending it to guys like, for example, Josh Downs, also is going really late, Cedric Tillman going undrafted. And there in that instance, you had like too many guys ahead of Cedric Tillman, which kind of makes sense why he was going so late. But for guys like Tank Dell, where I think with Tank Dell, it was an ambiguous wide receiver core, just like you probably could argue that for the Browns too. So really what I'm trying to get to is, number one, the upside of these guys is so asymmetric for the impact it can have on teams in best ball that missing on them is so painful that you really want to. It's so costly to miss out on that huge boost that you can get from a hit like a Tank Dell or a Puka, that you really should make sure. Diversifying stinks when it leads to you being off of like, oh my God, I could have had 30% Puka, but instead I split it between some Puka and some Tank Dell and some Cedric Tillman and some Josh Downs, right? Like, you're sad you diversified then, but like, let me just, for the other side of the coin where I didn't get to as much Puka, I got to a lot of Tutu instead. I didn't get to as much Tank Dell. I got to Robert Woods instead. And it's like, you really should just be willing to, you need to mix in these rookies that are free or cheap, because the upside is so asymmetric. And then
free and cheap day two rookie receivers.
Yeah, they're good.
You just got to take them. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown, he was like the classic, like going free and so cheap, even in an environment when receivers were going higher that year already. And same with Tank Dell.
Yeah. And like Marvin Mims, we all got so out over our skis and excited for Marvin Mims, which we'll get to more on the next chart, I guess. But, we were drafting him with so much more confidence than we were drafting Tank Dell or Josh Downs or Puka, right? And it's my other thing that I was trying to play off the Tank Dell thing is, in the year that Devonta Smith came out, this was like early enough in the transition of the league where like, the way that they were calling pass interference had changed at that point for a couple of years. But I still my brain was broken to, I need the big bodied alpha wide receivers. Where's the
I need men.
Yeah, where's the 220-pound alpha that's going to throw guys around? I need him to box guys out in the end zone. And for that reason, I was like, I'm out on Devonta Smith. He's too small. It's just not going to work in the league. And now we've got such a track record. The market's probably going to have been caught up to this. So the edge is going to diminish. But just I'm never going to talk myself out of a guy because he's too small anymore. Because I did the same thing with Tank Dell. It's like, he's too small. He's not going to win. I know that I was wrong about Devonta Smith for that. But Tank Dell's even smaller than Devonta Smith. So it has to be true this time that it's not a good idea. But just throw the size shit out the window for wide receiver. It doesn't matter anymore. If a guy can play, he can play. But just needed to get that rambling off my chest there.
Yeah, I think a way to think about it is that as the average size goes down, like for example, Jalen Waddle's 185, Garrett Wilson 192, and like those aren't receivers that we think of as small anymore. If like that's just like an average normal size receiver, then like the outlier bottom of that has to be lower too. Like it used to be 185, like was the small receiver, and they'd be the outlier if they made it. But no, that's like a normal size. Like even Jamar Chase, only 200 pounds. Like obviously that's a big man, but like he I wouldn't have thought him as like that. That I'm surprised by how low that number is, and definitely something to keep in mind that the receiver sizes are coming down.
Yeah, very very good point there. Other guys on this chart, return of Debo. He had some opportunities in the rushing game too that you like to see just for his overall upside. It's not that the rushing touches themselves are inherently all that valuable, but the way I look at it with Debo is he's kind of like Debo's just a home run hitter in the same way that like a Breece Hall or a Kenneth Walker is a home run hitter, right? Where you're just like, I just want the chances at like the big play to explode and break the slate. And so Debo being involved in the rushing game is nice just because you're like, hey, that's another chance at a big breakaway touchdown type play. Jordan Addison, I don't know if you watched the all of the Minnesota game. He looks for real, man. Like I want to say his open score isn't the greatest. There's some other underlying metrics that like don't look at him so favorably. Like I would say
those I actually don't pay a lot of attention to those advanced metric stuff because I saw that for example, what's his name, Tyreek Hill, his yards after the catch score is like low, and they're like, oh, it's because when he catches the ball, he's expected to go like 50 yards to the house, and then like, oh, what about his open score? Oh, that's not great either. Okay, well.
Part of I know I read an explanation on those models, and part of it was the distance to. So they're using player coordinate data, and so one of the features in the model is distance between nearest defender, and so with a player like Tyreek Hill, where there's shit happening in a Tyreek Hill play that doesn't happen anywhere else. It's like the model is fit for all this normal stuff happening. And then Tyreek Hill's like, and I have 28 yards of separation between me and the next closest guy on the field. And so, yeah, it's just every model is wrong, right? It's just like, how wrong is the model? And so what you can do as an analyst is find those areas of fragility or weakness in the model and add context to that with like understanding what's going on here. And I think it's important to dig into the model, see what the features are, learn the weaknesses and fragilities. And then you can have those, like, I think open score can be really valuable when you figure out where the flaws are in that model and how to properly apply it. And so I don't know exactly why Jordan Addison is scoring poorly in some of those advanced metrics, but I can just tell you, like, I loved him as a prospect, and it's translating into rookie production, and the dude just looks like he can play. Early, I'm calling my shot early next season. Jordan Addison's efficient price as a best ball pick is going to be late 4th round, and if he's going any later than that, I'll have a shitload of him.
I think that's pretty fair. Because he wasn't going that much later than that this year, right?
He was like 7th round, I want to say 7th, 8th.
So
I guess
that's with the rookie, with the sort of like rookie risk where we haven't seen him play in the NFL, and now we have, and he's obviously very good. So I think that's very reasonable.
So you're saying my take wasn't hot enough? I should have said 3rd round.
No, your take was not hot. I'm sorry to tell you.
I gotta learn how to spice these takes up.
But then again, I react to news very aggressively, sometimes too aggressively. So it may not be. It's probably not like hot to me, but maybe to someone is like, oh, actually, like maybe to somebody else it is.
All right, Drico, we have a prayer of coming in under 2 hours, and this last chart has like nothing on it. It's a wasteland. So let's hit this last wide receiver chart. There's really only like 2 guys on here that are at all interesting. And you know what? I realized the one that's the most interesting to me isn't even on the chart, but Jayden Reed was interesting. I actually, believe it or not, had a Jayden Reed share in the Dog Bowl this last week. And I want to say that was a team where I had like 4 of the 6 pieces that I needed to be nutted. And I think I had like a Diontae Johnson for 2.2 on it that sunk it, but would have been so fun to win another Miami ticket with Jayden Reed on there. he's the only guy that I'm seeing on this chart where I'm like, that's a guy. And Rashee Rice, we've talked about obviously already before, but
yeah,
he's Jayden Reed is a guy that there's potential for him to graduate, in my opinion, and he looks good. I wouldn't be surprised at all if by next season Jayden Reed is the best wide receiver on the Packers, and I that's not a hot take. That's just the facts.
Right. Yeah, definitely have enjoyed watching Jayden Reed play well. Another day 2 sort of pick where he wanted to take some shots on with how cheap he was. And I can't even. Where's Marvin Mims on this chart?
He doesn't even qualify, man, because he doesn't run enough routes. So like I feel like the whole world was on they're coming out of bye week. Sean Payton did some self scouting. Marvin Mims is going to get some run this week narrative, and then he looks awesome returning kicks and returning punts. He's like breaking tackles, cutting back across the field on that kick return where he cut it back across the field and broke multiple tackles. I was waiting for him to get caught from behind when he was running horizontal.
Because and there's a guy running after him, and like he was holding the ball normally, so it's like, please don't fumble, please don't fumble.
I'm like, he's got to be going slower. He just broke like 3 tackles. Like he's gonna get caught from behind here, and he just refuses to get caught from behind, man. Like the kid is electric. Free Marvin Mims. Free Marvin Mims.
I agree.
This is why.
Wait, no,
This is why I'm hot. I'm hot because I'm fly. You ain't because you mad.